South Florida is preparing for a potential influx of migrants from Haiti who are fleeing the violence there that has been occurring for the last year or so. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announced that an additional 250 officers and troops will be deployed to Florida's southern coast. This comes as a group of Americans, including best-selling author Mitch Albom, were airlifted out of Haiti in a private rescue mission that was spearheaded by two congressmen. Cristian Benavides is at the border of Haiti and the Dominican Republic, where some people are trying to get out. So, Cristian, I saw your report yesterday for the evening news. What's happening there today? Has the influx of folks trying to get into the Dominican Republic slowed, or is it increasing?
Vlad, good morning. What we know is that people are constantly trying to get in. But what's happening today is quite interesting. You may see a large flow of Haitians that are walking right behind me. What's happening is that there is a market that lives here on the border, and 3 times a week, people from Haiti are able to come in and shop at the market. We're told that on Monday, 38,000 people from Haiti came just to shop at the market, do some commerce there. So that's what's currently happening. What is not typical is that women and children are being put on one side and men are being put on another side. They have to go through a separate screening. And we're told that this has been happening ever since the prison break that sparked what's currently taking place in Haiti.
That is fascinating. A lot of different elements to talk to you about. Can we talk about this mission that successfully evacuated some Americans, including that author? How did that play out?
Right, the author said it looked straight. It looked like it was straight out of a movie. Now, this was coordinated along with Congress members that were able to facilitate the transfer. But just to give you a sense, he describes that the helicopter came in the middle of the night and the blades were still running. And he says that at that point, the people that were in the helicopter said, everyone run in, run in, run in. These are folks that were volunteers for the orphanage that he has there in Port-au-Prince, but they were right in the middle of where all this chaos is playing out. And I think what's important to note is that people who live in Port-au-Prince are unable to leave their homes. They're unable to leave their neighborhoods. And what people have been describing to us is that they can't even leave to go get food. It's the sort of thing where they have to talk to neighbors, ask if they have any more food, any more fuel, and just sort of share with each other. Yeah. Back to the rescue mission, the helicopter is there. He says it looks like it's straight out of a movie. Everyone gets into the helicopter. It's about 10 people, and then they fly out. He couldn't give us too many details about where they went to next, because they wanted to these sort of private rescues are now starting to happen, and the details are not really out there for publication, just because they want to keep it in a way where nobody interferes with these type of private transfers. But I mean, this is someone who had the connections and had the means to be able to do this. You got to think about the people that live in Port-au-Prince, where 80% of the capital city is controlled by gangs, and there's no way out. And when I say no way out, it means no way out of your neighborhood, no way out of your home, or you're pushed out of your home when the gangs take over your home. So truly a dire situation there.
Yeah, and we should point out, and Cristian, you have done this as well, which is that the violence is for the most part concentrated in the capital city of Port-au-Prince. The people who live outside of Port-au-Prince in the rest of the country, even where you are at the border, it looks relatively calm in your live shot behind you, which is typical of the area that borders the DR and Haiti. But Cristian, there's something else that's happening, and I wonder, and you may not have any reporting on this because you are unable to get into the country. No one's able to get into Haiti, but there's this meeting that's happening with these Caribbean countries, with representatives of the United States. But what a lot of people are wondering is, where are the representatives from Haiti that are able to decide their own fate? It is still, even in the situation that Haiti is in today, it's still a sovereign country, and the notion of a bunch of other countries deciding who should either replace Ariel Henry or what the future of Haiti should be strikes a lot of people as...
I mean, I don't think... Ariel Henry was in Puerto Rico when this group was gathering initially in Jamaica, so he wasn't even there for that.
He wasn't even there for that.
And I was wondering the very same thing that you're asking right now. Sorry, Cristian.
No, it's okay. What I was going to say is, another point of contention here is that ultimately Prime Minister Ariel Henry says that he has to sign off on whoever is going to be part of this council. There are unconfirmed reports that the council has already been formed. But ultimately, if it's Ariel Henry who is signing off on it, how are the people of Haiti going to feel about that? And will that really lead to some sort of substantial change, which is what's needed in Port-au-Prince? The people of Haiti have a lot of hope in that, okay, things, I spoke to somebody, he is a minister, and he lives in Cap Haitian, so he is not in Port-au-Prince, but what he said is, you know, we have this hope that things could potentially change, because this is the worst, according to his words, the worst that I've ever seen it, the way that things have unfolded to this point. So there is the hope there, but it's just, when you hear about other countries making the decision for the people of Haiti, just something doesn't sit right, particularly with those who, the Haitians that we've spoken to here.
Yeah. Cristian Benavides, thank you so much, Cristian.